Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Get to Know Them. I am so excited to have you here today. I have a very special guest. I cannot wait to introduce you to him. But first, if this is the very first time you've ever watched the show or you're new to the show, this is a web series I created when the pandemic first started. It is called Get to Know Them. And the reason that I created this show was to introduce you to some of the most inspiring people that I know so that they can share their stories with you and you can walk away feeling great and feel inspired yourself. So I'm really excited to spend the next 45 minutes to an hour with you. All you have to do is sit back and enjoy the show. I'm going to introduce today's guest to you in just a moment. But before I do that, I wanted to talk to you about two sponsors that we have for our show. First of all, we have Brenda Badome, and her website is brendabadome.com. She is an amazing clothing designer in Toronto, Ontario. She makes beautiful clothes for women. I'm always wearing her things. The shirt I have on today is actually really nice. It's from her spring collection. It's a deep navy. I don't know if the color comes through on the screen, and it's got like a ruffle detail down the front. So you'll see that on her website now. Great clothing and very comfortable, which I love. And then our second sponsor is actually my business, Glam Jewels, located right here in Burlington, Ontario. And that's where I'm broadcasting from, here at the Glam Jewels studio. And our website is glamjulz.com. And we do a whole series of different pieces of jewelry and a lot of pieces that give back to community. So make sure you check out our pieces that give back. With Mother's Day coming, it's always wonderful to give a gift with heart and purpose. So make sure you check that out. Are you ready? Let's get started. I cannot wait to introduce you to a longtime friend of mine. I think we're going on almost 40 years of friendship. Oh my goodness. Kevin September, who I have known since Blakelock High School days, for those of you who are watching that went to high school in Oakville, Ontario. Kevin September, curiosity, creativity, and the magic of pop culture has provided Kevin with some wonderful personal stories. From his start in radio at 13 years old, reading uncensored Rolling Stone magazine cover stories for the blind and vision impaired, his years as a nightclub DJ that began years before he was legally old enough to be in many of the venues he entertained in, to that night at legendary Toronto rock club, the Gasworks. You saw Wayne's World, right? Nickelback weren't the headliners that evening, but Kevin couldn't get their hooks out of his head and later signed the band to their first national distribution deal. A few years later, his persistence and passion for brand integration took client SC Johnson's Windex, we all know Windex, he took their brand well beyond basic product placement in the record-breaking film My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Kevin has many stories, but the ones he is most proud of have come from his collaborations with celebrities and other influencers in creating impactful philanthropic activations, something he's become known for. He has over 20 plus years of meaningful projects. We're going to talk to him about all of those projects. We're going to talk to him about the celebrities who he's rubbed shoulders with, collaborated with, and made big things happen with. As I said, I went to high school with Kevin. He was charismatic then. He's still that same charismatic guy he was then. And I'm so excited for you to learn more about his mission to give back with star power. Let's not wait another moment. Kevin! Bing!
I
Drum roll.
I almost left the room. I didn't know who that guy was. And I think it's been 37 years. Let's not push it.
Okay, 37. I was going to say we're coming up to 40, but not quite.
Yeah.
What year did you come over to Blakelock? What year was it?
I was 17.
Okay, so I was 16. So yeah, that's
we won't
yeah,
say
37 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a while.
It's
so
a
good to be
while.
here. Thank you for having me. I'm honored. I don't know why I'm here, but I guess I'm about to find out.
Yes, you are. You're here because I love you and there's lots to talk about. We got 37 years of stuff to cover in an hour. So I think we
Yeah.
can do it. But before the 37-year, I want to go back even further, Kevin. I need to know, what did little Kevin want to be when he grew up?
Wasn't so little. I think the first time I knew what I wanted to do, or I thought I knew what I wanted to do after school, was the first time I did a musical. I think in high school in grade 9. I kind of went, "Oh, I really like this." I liked, like, I don't know. It wasn't so much of the gratification as the satisfaction of like doing something that you love doing and hearing an audience response. Um, so I knew then for some reason that I didn't even want to be a movie star. I wanted to be an actor on stage. And I think that may have changed it a little bit over the years where, I think I heard even athletes want to be rock stars and rock stars want to be athletes and stuff. I think, yeah, there was a brief period where I tried to be a rock star, but then ended up working with them instead. And I still fiddle with noodling on instruments myself, but I am a master of none.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was
Wow.
an actor, and I took that a little further and auditioned for the National Theatre School and the Vancouver Playhouse later.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, we won't go into why I didn't go, but yeah, it was. I think part of it for me was too. I ended up doing some professional acting in the big city of Toronto, and like acting that you got paid for and stuff, and
Okay.
found that at least in that time, I felt like you would always have to have a second or a third job if you only wanted to do theater.
Right.
So yeah, it was kind of
Yeah.
this sort of sad kind of realization. But ironically, years later, of course, I have 3 or 4 jobs now. So,
Yeah.
so
Isn't it funny how that
yeah.
works out? And, and I'm curious, Kevin, I'm there's things in your bio I thought I knew everything about you, but I didn't know that you started in radio at 13.
Right next door to Blakelock.
Yeah.
Right next door to Blakelock.
Oh
So
yeah.
that may
Where
reveal
was that?
that may reveal another secret that you didn't know.
Yeah.
So further to show our age, you remember the
Hmm.
lottery Winterio?
Yes, of course.
So Winterio used to give tons of charitable grants. I think that kind of was the start of the Ontario Lottery Corporation and them doing a lot of the grant work they do now to charities and nonprofits. So the way I understand it, the Winterio group gave a large donation to what was it called? Brookside Library,
Oh, Woodside Library.
right next
Woodside
door,
on, yeah,
right up
Woodside
from,
Library.
yeah. So in the
Yeah.
basement, as I remember, the basement, I believe it was, might have been a back room, but I think it was the basement. There was a radio studio set up strictly for whatever cable was in those days. I understood that because, of course, doing this at 13, you wanted your family and friends to listen. And I was told that you needed some specialty subscription from your cable provider at, I guess, Cogeco at the time. And
Oh,
yeah, it was a Ontario sponsored radio station in the basement of that library that I used to go to after school. And it was my start in radio years before I actually worked in radio. In fact, I don't know if I wanted to work in radio anymore after that. It was a fun experience, but
mhm.
it's too bad because what I heard had happened to that, it didn't last very long because they were broken into twice and their gear was stolen twice. And I guess insurance in Ontario managed to replace it the first time, but the second time they were gone. So
That's so sad. So what were you doing there? What's a 13-year-old doing
so I only have
in
very vivid memories of my first show, and
uh-huh.
smartly the producer said, "We're gonna have you." Um, Unlike what you said to me, we're gonna have you record this instead of going live. And I was just kind of like, yeah, okay, whatever. But then I quickly understood why, because my very first story was a cover story in Rolling Stone for then John Cougar, now John Cougar Mellencamp. And
Mhm.
he was new then, he was fresh, and he was foul mouthed. And I don't know if we can say the words on this program that I had to
Sure.
say. So I
Yeah.
censored things like motherfucker.
Yeah.
I generally don't say those things. And even when I just said it, So
Yeah.
the producer stopped me and said, cut. The visually impaired and blind cannot see the words that you're censoring. So if they're a fan of John Cougar and they want to hear what John Cougar said, you have to tell them what John Cougar said. And I said, but my parents will be well, your parents won't hear the show because it's on a specialty cable network. So
Wow.
13-year-old me learned how to swear from a Ontario sponsored radio network for the visually impaired. Yeah.
Oh my God. I love that story. That's crazy.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to
Wow.
tell John Cougar Mellencamp that story. I never have, but one day.
Yeah. Yes, one day. Have you met him?
I met his drummer.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
got
So
to
you
know
got,
Kenny
yeah,
Arnoff, but no, I haven't met. I haven't met John, but
yeah.
he's still a character.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, hey, speaking of John, not to go off track here, but do you remember the SCTV sketch where Ed Grimley turned into John Cougar Mellencamp after drinking like a potion that he created in the lab? Did you ever see that
No,
one?
I think you have to send me that link.
Oh my God, I gotta send you. It's so funny. Yeah, it's hilarious. So the nightclub DJ stuff.
Yeah, so that
This was
started.
happening when we already knew each other, right?
Yeah,
Like that started. Okay.
yeah, that happened in Oakville. Started in Oakville, and later moved as I moved to Toronto. And
Yeah. So how did you get started in Oakville? What was how'd you
I
dive into
loved.
that?
I always loved music. Grew up on 50s and 60s. My dad turned me on to as a kid, um, and I think for most of my life, up until I met my now wife, I didn't talk about much else other than music. Um, she helped me change that in a good way. I don't mean to put that
Yeah.
me off. No, there's lots to say about that, but music was kind of an obsession all through and an escape for me all through my youth. So one day, I guess I got talking to a neighbor when I was, underage as far as the nightclub scene. And it turned out the neighbor managed, he was a drummer in a local band. And I used to always see him loading gear into his van. And found out, I guess, that he was the manager of the Riverside. Do you remember the Riverside?
Of course.
Down by the water in Oakville, one of the
Yeah.
coolest bars ever. Actually, it was 3 bars. A lot of
Mhm.
people don't realize that. It was
That's the biggest loss when I think of all the things that have happened in Oakville. That
yeah.
was a mistake.
For those who don't know, it's a huge
Yeah.
condo now, with no access to their area of the water. But it used to be a place as kids we would skate up to their patio. Even in the winter, we could skate up to it and get a hot chocolate. They had weddings on that patio where they covered the patio with sand and made a beach. And it was a 3-bar nightclub. So there was the main level where I DJ'd was Green Streets, complete with the elevated light up dance floor like Saturday Night Fever and brass railing around it, and a very tiny DJ booth, as I recall. And then downstairs was, I can't remember. It's funny, I can remember names of bands that played there, but I can't remember what they called it.
Yeah.
But downstairs was like a biker bar with cover bands, and then
Okay.
upstairs was the Crow's Nest, um, and that's where you'd find like Tokyo Rose before they were Glass Tiger, and Platinum Blonde when they were still covering the Police, and David Wilcox. And there's a great story about David Wilcox coming in there once. But and then there was the hotel itself, which apparently was haunted. I never stayed there, but there was stories
Yeah.
about the certain rooms in the hotel. But yeah, if you remember, trees grew right through the patio, like 100-year-old trees, and
Yeah.
special place to hang out inside or outside. And
Yeah.
yeah, so John managed that place, and I don't know, one thing led to another, and a 17-year-old me gets a phone call that their DJ was sick and they really needed a replacement. And I don't even remember if I asked my parents. I sort of remember an argument, so I probably did, but
Mhm.
somehow I got away with it and got down there and I did the gig, and he was impressed and the crowd enjoyed themselves. So he asked me to come back again. Then the DJ came back, but him and I seemed to get along, and I became the fill-in guy. And then he left and I became the full-on guy. So the
Wow.
big underage part of it is funny because you probably at some point worked in a restaurant. You had to be uh, 18 to serve, 19 to drink.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I was 17, so not even allowed to be there. So I
Yeah.
guess he had told the staff without filling me in. I was just going with the flow, but he told the staff that I was 18 when I was 17. And somebody, I don't know, made some comment, and I was sort of kicked under the table and went with it. And then on my 18th birthday, the staff got together and bought me champagne. And he kicked me under the table again and said, "Enjoy."
Wow.
So that's when I realized the staff weren't in on the gag, that they thought I was 18 when I started and I was 17, and they thought this was my 19th birthday.
God.
So, but so many memories
Well,
out of that
no
group
kidding.
of
And
people.
I was gonna say, lucky for you, you were like 6 foot. You were
Yeah,
already like as tall
yeah,
as you are now, so
six
you
four.
definitely looked older, right? With
Yeah, and it
your
was
height.
wild. Yeah, and so that kind of
Yeah.
became my friend circle, as I, as you know, later left high school at 17, kind of under some strange circumstances, and had a rocky time at home around then too. And but this group of friends always had things going on, and it was that group of people that I ended up, or at least a few of them, that I ended up getting on a bus at the C&E grandstand back in the day. We
Yeah.
met the bus and went over the border to see the Joshua Tree tour by U2 in Detroit a year before it played Toronto, where again alcohol was served, and it came with your ticket to the show. The Americans thought I was of age too. Apparently, I was 21 in America. So
Yeah.
my maturity level paid off.
Yeah, for sure. That's so funny. I didn't know all this was happening in the background. And it's true. Like when you came over to Blakelock, you always seemed like I didn't know you left at 17. You seemed like
Yeah,
you were older then, but you were already in an adult world where the rest of us were not, maybe
a
so
little
much.
bit. I mean,
Yeah.
if you remember, I had this great plan to climb out the window when I quit school because I was really sick of one particular teacher's attitude about his course being only for people that were preparing for university. And at that point, I was pretty sure I wasn't cut out for university, or at least
Mhm.
not qualified if I was cut out for it.
Yeah.
And I
Or even
remember,
Kevin not interested in it. Like
mm,
you know,
I think I
sometimes.
was, I think I was, I think I had envy of those people that knew what they wanted to do. And like I said,
Yeah.
I did like the idea of going to theater school. I think I'd
Mhm.
auditioned though before I went to Blakelock. I think I auditioned at 16. But I remember I guess somebody tipped off the guidance counselor, the teacher, that I this plan to climb out the window, and the teacher pissed me off as he usually did. And the counselor said, "Why are you leaving?" or what, and I said, "I'm losing money with every test I fail." And he signed the paper and said, "You'll be fine."
Oh my God, he probably was like entrepreneur. Bye-bye.
But
Go do
then it
what you
was
gotta
funny
do.
because I went into that world that the teacher it was an economics class that I was frustrated with. And I
Mhm.
went to work at a stockbroker because my dad had been in that business and that was all I really knew was that side. I was horrible in math, but I was great at math when it involved money,
Ah,
which is really interesting.
yeah.
Because it's not a priority. It's never been a priority for me other than to get some of the things that I want and to live comfortably. But yeah, it's so I did that that was like the backup plan for the creative life, and
Okay.
did that for a couple of years in Toronto, worked at a couple stockbrokers, and
Yeah.
remembered why I was there and got out.
Yeah. God, that's incredible. I had no idea that the DJ thing started at Riverside.
Yeah, that
What,
was my
where
first
else?
gig.
Yeah. Where else? What other venues did you like? Where
I
else
worked for
did
the
you
local. I
DJ
worked for
after
the
that?
local radio station for 5.5
Yeah.
years. CHWO, CJMR. So it was
Yeah.
one side was oldies and Blue Jays and Maple Leafs. The other side was Christian pop adult, I guess they call it now, adult contemporary then,
Yeah.
and Blue Jays and Maple Leafs. So it was kind of funny when you were transitioning from Christian programming to the contemporary or to the Blue Jays. I always had this
Yeah.
I always had Van Morrison and Cliff Richard whenever God Shines His Light queued up, ready to go. Thought that was always a good transition. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I did that at the local radio station, and then for a while there, I was overnight guy at the radio station. So I'd work at the nightclub across the road until last call, and then run over to queue up some records for
Yeah.
somebody to take over and run over to the radio station. Literally run up my shift,
Yeah.
run up the stairs for my shift, and start playing records on the overnight shift at the radio station.
God, that's crazy. So that bar was it O'Shea's or Houlihan's where you were?
It had
Was it?
both those bars side by side had a few
Yeah.
different names. Bicycle Club.
Oh, Bicycle Club. So were you there in the
O'Shea's.
Bicycle Club days? I
Yeah,
forgot all about that.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
and
Yeah.
O'Shea's
Amazing.
and
Yeah.
Houlihan's,
Yeah.
and then I went
The
to
only time I went
Montana.
to Houlihan's was to see Teenage Head. I th
Oh,
and then it turned into whatever it was after that. Corner Pocket, I think. Or
oh yeah, and
yeah. Yeah.
Coca-Colas.
Oh yeah.
I
My
forgot about
God,
that
these
one.
names, eh?
And
Yeah.
then I went to Monahan's at that point, and Teenage Head played there too. I had a great conversation with Frankie Venom at Monahan's. Um,
Yeah.
so Monahan's was a whole other beast because the Sheridan College kids hung out there, and so
Yeah.
it was a real boost of creativity every time I was there. Um,
God.
oh, that's funny. I just
Yeah.
messed with my own timeline
Yes.
because I was at Monahan's when Dan Woods came in, and Dan was Mr. Radich on Degrassi Junior High. And
Okay.
Dan Woods, I introduced him to his wife um, that at that bar, but
Yeah.
he also was a sales guy. See, actors in Canada, they need other jobs. He was a sales
Yeah.
guy at the radio station in Oakville. So
Okay.
him and a buddy I thought they were joking. They'd come in, they'd have a few beers, and they'd say, "Oh, we got to get you a demo tape. You got to come audition for the radio station." Well, it turned out the radio station in Oakville and Mississauga was going 24 hours. They used to be way up on Wycroft, and they literally, like, they went off the air at, I don't know if it was 10 o'clock or midnight
Yeah.
back in those days. And they were moving to Lakeshore and Trafalgar, and they were going 24 hours.
Wow.
So these guys just kept coming in and saying, you should make a demo. And yeah, at that time I was a nightclub DJ, and I couldn't even get my head around the whole radio idea since I'd been 13 doing, quite a different type of radio show. So one night, as I, sort of describe it, they kidnapped me after the bar and took me to the studio because it was off the air at midnight. And we went into the studio and made a demo tape with some of the records that I used in the bar and some of the records from the library at the radio station. And I remember that, the Doobie Brothers, Listen to the Music was on there. The Ozark
Yeah.
Mountain Daredevils, Jackie Blue was on there. There's a couple harder rock ones on there, and I did a weather take and I did a traffic take and all the stuff that they told me to do to make this demo. And I had another friend at Hits FM at the time in St. Catharines, and I shared the tape with him, and he said, "Yeah, I think there's something there." And then I put it back in the drawer. and,
Oh
then,
God.
and then these guys kept coming into the bar and saying, "Have you dropped off your demo yet?" And I said, "No." And as it turned out, I had a doctor's appointment, checkup or a physical or something, and the doctor was in the same building as the station or around the corner.
Uh-huh.
And I literally kind of tossed my tape on the receptionist's desk because she wasn't there and left.
Wow.
And I got home that night from the doctor, and there was a voicemail from the station manager saying, "Do you want to come in for a meeting?" And the first thing he said, "Well, this music really isn't our format." And I kind of had this, I don't think he ever knew that I recorded it in his studio using some of his records. But I thought, if I work for this guy, he apparently doesn't listen to the station, so I'll be fine. And I got the
Hilarious.
overnight shift.
Wow, that's amazing. What, so Kevin, I can't like you were that nervous to drop that tape off. Like, was it nerves or
I
was
was
it
nervous
I'm
to
not
come on
sure I
your
want to
show,
do
and
this?
here I am.
Oh my God.
I'm a social
Oh,
introvert, Monica.
but you're
I'm
one of the most social, like when I mean, you've always been like so easy to talk to, and I would never guess that, you
Yeah, I
know?
think that's something I discovered later in
Yeah.
life when I looked into my mental health, which would take a whole other show to
Mhm.
talk about. But yeah, I think I'm a social introvert. I need to work up to
Yeah.
these things. But yeah, it worked out 5.5 years, 6 years
Yeah.
maybe, and I did every shift there. I went from overnights to swing guy to the swing guy ended up covering the mornings or covering the afternoons when the hosts were away for their yearly vacations. So I was
Mhm.
trusted to cover the top show and the bottom show, so to speak, and produced Leaf games and created commercials for some of the hosts. And they had a really weird format at CJMR where they would if it was it's owned by Moses and Eimer now, the whole network. But
Yeah.
if it was today, Monica for Glam Jewels could you could have your own radio show there. You could be doing this there.
Okay.
So all you would
Right.
do is you would sell your own advertising to pay for the airtime, and you'd go on the radio.
Ah,
So we had the Irish show, we had the Portuguese show, we had the Catholic show, we had the India show. You know, it was so all those producers would come to a buddy and I that were producers and say, "Oh, could you voice spots for us? I'll give you $50, or in some cases, I'll buy you dinner, or I'll take you out tomorrow, or I'll give you
ah.
hockey tickets," you know, and what a fun network that was. So, you know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay, well, this is a perfect segue because speaking of network and meeting people, and you know, like everybody after high school, we kind of lose touch and all that stuff. But one of the things that that I think that you and I had in common that started our friendship was that we were both big Roxy Music fans, and we both loved Brian Ferry. And I remember reconnecting with you. It's not that long ago. I mean, it's within the last 10 years through Instagram.
yeah.
And up pops a photo of you and your beautiful wife, Rosalind, like with Brian Ferry. And he looks like he's having the freaking time of his life. I've never seen a bigger smile on that guy's face. And I'm like, what in the hell? Kevin met Brian Ferry like after all these years. And then I texted you right away. I was like, hey, I just found you and I saw this. And then you and I like reconnected. But I'd love to know the story of like now that you're explaining sort of where you came from, what you were doing in those earlier years. I can see how this beautiful network kept building and building. But you have very strategically met the right people and introduce you've always been good at bringing the right people together, and now you're doing that in a way that's philanthropic. So can you talk to us a little bit about the early days of meeting big people, big names like Brian Ferry and Bob Dylan and all these types of people?
Well, that started, my wife kind of, even though she wasn't in my life at that time, kind of brought it into perspective when I was talking about the first concerts I went to and how I had this draw backstage even back then, just to meet my favorite performers. In the first 3 concerts I went to in my life, the artists broke up after playing Toronto, and so I thought I was a jinx, but I got to meet some of them, but almost didn't go to any more shows because I wanted to preserve great music. But the Brian Ferry thing, it's fun because I often recall you giving me this beautiful, I wish I still had it. You gave me a drawing that you made of Brian Ferry back in high school. And I knew we would be friends, even though there'd be distance and time apart. That Monica was my tribe. Meeting Brian Ferry was huge, but also the way I met Brian Ferry was super awesome too, because I'd befriended a guy named John Punter who produced some of your favorite records, not only Brian Ferry and Roxy Music, but the Spoons. And also, if he didn't produce, he was engineering records like T-Rex and Slade back when he was in England, but later moved to Canada and worked with the Spoons, worked with the Kings from Oakville. And I'm trying to think how it all came down. I was working at a little record label and somehow got connected with him, I think through a band he had worked with, one of the last bands he worked with before he ran the family pub, which is a whole other story that John can tell you sometime. But he mentioned to me something about Brian Ferry coming to town, and I don't think I'd seen Brian at that point live. So either Brian Ferry was coming to town or Roxy Music was coming to town for a reunion. Something was happening, and he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to go because somebody was going to come through with tickets and they hadn't yet, and it was sold out and all this stuff was going on. Anyway, I remember shortly thereafter I got tickets. I don't remember how, but I ended up with tickets, and I said, I'm not going to call anybody until I know that John Punter has a ticket. So I'm going to keep my extra ticket aside for you. Try to let me know as soon as possible, so I'm not stuck with it, though I wasn't too worried about that. But I guess the generosity paid off. It was just like something simple. I just said, would it not be fun to go to a Brian Ferry show with the guy who produced some of the earlier music? Sure it would. So I just held this ticket aside. And I got either a phone call or an email shortly before the show saying, "You're so kind. Thank you so much. I'm going to the night before you're going. Is there if there's anything I can do for you?" And at the time, I think I had this this huge Mamona, or maybe before, maybe A Slave to Love, something, a big mountain poster. Should I send that over? And he said, I can't remember what the joke was, but he responded humorously, and that was that. And about 2 weeks after the show, I get, back in those days, a letter, but it wasn't just a letter, it was a typed letter from John, typed and then signed. Again, just saying how much he appreciated the generosity, and it's not a poster, but please accept the enclosed with my thanks and regards. And it was his backstage pass that said all access, and then it was the ticket stub from it was either Massey Hall or Roy Thompson Hall, signed in Sharpie, Brian Ferry. And I usually didn't appreciate autographs when I hadn't met the person that it was signed. I kind of have this thing that I don't have too many autographs by people I haven't actually met. And there's probably people in the audience going, autographs? We call it a selfie now.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't do autographs. But so I still cherish that. But I guess a few years went by. then the Roxy Music reunion happened. My wife and I were in the right place at the right time. We had tickets to the show that I don't think we paid for. And then as we were kind of standing around afterwards, a record company friend came up and said, I don't have any passes, but if it's just you and your wife, why don't you try to blend into the after show line? And just as I joked with him that I'm 6'4.5". I don't blend.
Yeah.
Um,
I was just going to say.
but I started to weave into the line where he was. And just as Rosalind and I got in the line, security guy says, or a security woman, I think, said, make sure you have your passes visible. No one gets in without a pass. And I was like, oh. And he just looked at me and my buddy and said, I'm sorry. We tried. I said, hey, I'm blending. Like, this isn't over until I get stopped.
Uh-huh.
So we got waved through and got through the first thing. And then my buddy goes, oh, sorry again. And I went, what do you mean? And he points up to the top of the stairs we were going to, and there was a very large man checking passes. And I just smiled and started laughing. And my buddy goes, what's so funny? I said, it's no problem. That was a guy who had taken care of me and Reuben Hurricane Carter when we went to meet Bob Dylan. And I'd followed up and written a letter to his boss about how wonderful he treated Reuben and how he was there with a flashlight every time Reuben stood up, because Reuben was in his late 70s at the time. And I was appreciative of all the care, and sent a letter to his boss complimenting this particular security guard that was at the top of the stairs.
Oh, perfect.
And big hug at the top of the stairs, but I didn't get checked for my backstage pass. And I think the next thing was John Punter told me that he had just become a grandfather for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear somebody say something about where's Brian, and it was like Brian's gone to the bus to get something for John, and Brian comes wisping in with a big bottle of champagne and congratulates John, and John turns around and introduces Rosalind and I to Brian Ferry. It was kind of that quick. Wow. And then I went, oh my gosh, I went to hand somebody my phone to take a picture, and they pointed, and I turned around, and as I've been so blessed to have, David Lays was right behind me, ready to take that picture. And David was the amphitheater photographer for years and years and years, but also a very good friend of mine since I was probably since that first DJ gig, So David snapped that picture, and Brian just swooped in looking that cool and with that amazing grin of his. And I cherish that picture for sure. That became my first anniversary party invitation the year after I was married.
Great.
We had a Love is the Drug party and used that as the photo.
Oh my gosh, that's so perfect. I love hearing these kinds of stories. It speaks so much to what can happen in your life when you recognize people, you appreciate people, you work with people, you make that personal connection. And, just following up, writing that security guard's boss and telling him like what a great experience you had with this guy. Like, you never know. I feel like that. I don't know if that's a lost art or it's something special that we kind of learn to do. I don't know, Kevin, but I just know that those are the things that really go far. I've had this discussion many times with many guests about social media, and you're in that business, right? And what are we doing on social media and how are we connecting with people? But there is so much to be said for,
even in this digital world, just dropping. I literally apologized to someone in one of those thank you notes last week and said, oh, I should have sent this right away. But to drop a note to thank somebody for, even if it was their job to do what they did, to if it took you further along or helped you or made it easier. Yeah, I love doing that. Sending a quick note, because as you say, you never know that,
Mhm.
it's often that gatekeeper, that receptionist, that assistant, um, is someone you're going to want to know down the road, you know?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
And
So, yeah,
so,
it's so powerful.
do you still do that then? Because this
Yeah,
is about me. I'm making it all about me. But do
it
you
is
still
about you. It's called Get to Know Them with Kevin September.
do that?
These people already know me. They're good.
But do you do
Have
that?
you?
Do you still send notes?
Yeah, I do. I send notes. I'll also, I'll do things like I have a customer who buys a lot of jewelry from me, wonderful woman, and she was celebrating, well, not celebrating, she was grieving the death of her horse. And she had me make some custom jewelry in the colors of her horse, right? And so I made these pieces a few years ago. And just the other day I saw all of these cute little charms, like with one was a horse, one was a cowboy boot, one's a horseshoe, all these different. So I bought up all the charms, and I'm like, she needs an updated version of what I made her before, so I just did something new in those same colors. But and the woman is just like so great, she's so happy. But to me it's like, no, you're making me happy. Like, every time I put something out there, you're either buying it or you're in conversation with me about how much you love it or how it made you feel. Like, these are important things. Like, I think we all need that human connection when we're working at something. The comments and stuff on social media are great. I love that. But there's nothing better than somebody calling you and saying, hey, that thing you did last week or whatever, it was
Yeah.
amazing. And
Yeah.
yeah,
And it makes the story, whatever it was, more meaningful.
yeah,
And if it if it changed you in some way or helped you get to that next rung, or not even up, but just moving forward with a project or
yeah,
with whatever. Yeah, it's so important, because even just the feeling you get from that will push you that much further.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, because so few people
exactly.
do it. Because so few people do it.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
like,
true. It gives you a huge, like, not to say it's to be competitive, but it does give you a competitive advantage. People are gonna
yeah,
notice you first when you do those kinds of things.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
not so long ago that I used to always do men as career coaches. You might have been involved in women as career coaches, which is where that program started. It's the Halton Industry Education Council, or Halton Education Industry. I always get it confused, but it happens
Mhm.
in Burlington every year. And whenever I got asked for advice, I would say to the kids about like how to meet that person, or how to get to that mentorship or that apprenticeship or whatever. And I'd be like, don't text, pick up the phone, or at the very least,
Yeah.
send an email and tell that person that you admire them, or that you're interested in their work, or you want to know more. And, buy them lunch. And even as a kid, like, lunch could be a coffee and a muffin.
Mhm.
But go meet them, go figure out how to meet them, because that's what I
Mhm.
always did, even in those early days. Back in the early, before I ever did radio, well, after the Winterio thing, but before my career in radio, I used to meet my favorite radio DJs at nightclubs. If they'd be guest hosting at, even in Oakville, at a nightclub, and
Mhm.
I bugged the hell out of one of them. And the Futures program was happening right now. And when he said, the Futures program, I don't think, or it exists in a different form now, I think. But back then it would pay you for 16 weeks to go work in a job that could lead to your dream career. And yeah, just bugged that guy. And he was program director. And he said, was program director of a little station called CFNY back in the days, but it was in Brampton. And he said, but I can't afford to pay you. And I said, let me worry about that. I called the futures people and I said, I need to take the fast track program because this guy, I can work at my favorite radio station. And, you know, did that for 16 weeks. Yeah. So
amazing. So I have a big question for you. This is now, like, I feel like I'm going way back to headspace at that age.
And we haven't talked about the
So
charity stuff yet.
we haven't talked about the what? The charity
The
stuff. I know we got to get to that, but I have one question. And then we're going to go to that. But for me, but I like when we are in our teens and our 20s and we're moving along, to have the guts that you had to chase somebody down, to want to have lunch with them, to want to do that networking stuff. I can honestly tell you that has, for me, that's been something I've become good at in the last, I don't know, 20 years maybe. Like that was a big hurdle for me because I would always be so self-conscious. Like, why would this person want me? It was almost like a self-worth thing. Why the heck would they want to talk to me? I don't have anything to offer them. I was kind of in that space where when I hear you talking, I'm like, damn it, I wish I was like that. Like you're on a mission and you know what you need and you know what you could do for that person. So what happened in your life that gave you that confidence at such an early age?
I don't know about the confidence, and I don't know about. So one of the things I wish I had been as strategic about it then as I am now. There's a lot of people that I didn't stay in touch with that I could have, that I would love to still be in touch with. There's a lot of sort of opportunities that, because I'm still not that great at organizing and keeping track of, I know where everything is, but it's often a bit of a messy filing system. Let's put it that way. But yeah, that I wish I had have kept track of numbers and addresses and stuff. But so now I'm more strategic about knowing why I, want to get to know them. I think, we don't have time to really get into mental health stuff now, but knowing what I now know, and, I'm somebody that at over 50 was diagnosed with ADHD, small H, I think. But
Yeah.
among other challenges, I learned about that over 50. And looking back at what that means, I think it was one of my superpowers, sort of, rather than like always sort of wanting to know everything about somebody I admired, wanting to know everything about something that I liked to do or that I was interested in trying, going down rabbit holes, as I do, but finding that connection, whether that connection, like to my current stuff, is to a charitable cause in common or an underrepresented cause, or nonprofit, or whether that was just, I realized that songwriter, one of my earliest things was realizing that, when we were kids, there was a hit song called Drugs in My Pocket by a band called The Monks.
Mm-hmm.
The Monks played a show in Oakville at the old bingo hall that's now a union hall. And they played an adult show and an underage show when I was in grade 8. And I quickly kind of clued in, because I went down rabbit holes and read liner notes, that the Monks were actually the Straubs. And that the main songwriters, Hudson and Ford, were the same in both groups. One was this novelty group that weren't supposed to make a second record, but then the first record took off and they went on tour and made another record. And the other one was a prog rock, band that most, that only a certain age have heard of. But finding out, learning those details, finding a reason to connect, or something that I was deep, even back then, that I was interested in, musicians of the time, local musicians, I have very fond memories. I know you talked to, did you talk to Rob and Sandy, or just Rob?
Mm-hmm.
From Spoons?
Both. Yeah. Rob and Sandy. Yeah.
So Rob, I don't know Rob, but we have a lot of friends in common. But I have an early memory of working at W.H. Smith bookstore at Oakville Place. And it seemed like almost weekly, Rob would come to Oakville Place and he would stop into the bookstore. And he was always kind of interested in what was new. And, you know, it wasn't just magazines, it was books. And so those kind of connections, right? It's, I don't know if I'm making any sense at this point or just rambling, but
Yes.
yeah,
No, you are.
that's what kind of drove it.
Yeah.
I remember hearing stories about my favorite bands through either word of mouth or on radio or on TV, and grabbing onto a certain, you know, one of my early concerts, my first concert was ABBA when I was 11, which wasn't a great story then. It wasn't cool. I didn't talk about it. But of course, years later, you know, it was the Voulez-Vous tour. It was the Maple Leaf Gardens when they put on their Leaf jerseys, and it later became a Much Music special. Then I went and saw the Boomtown Rats, and I met Bob Geldof long before he was Sir Bob Geldof. And then I was fascinated with stories of his storytelling, you know, the fact that he'd been arrested in the States a week or two prior because he performed I Don't Like Mondays, and how he was called into court on the actual case behind I Don't Like Mondays and the statement that he made. I was fascinated by stuff like that always. You know, Bob Dylan with the hurricane and how he got involved back in the day with trying to get Rubin out of prison for a murder he didn't commit. So, and that's, of course, I think that does lead nicely, before you say it, I think that leads nicely into the charitable work, right? It's trying to find win-wins, whether you're meeting that person because you're just interested in them, and then you do want to get into what's in it for them, not just be selfish. But with a charitable thing, you got to think there's more in it for them than the cause, unless you know they have a personal connection to the cause. It's like, well, if they help you do this, they could meet this person, or they could do this work, or they could get paid for this, or their other talent could be exposed through the event you're doing. So.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't even realize that that's how it all came together. But I think I just figured out my whole career just on the back end of, of all of this.
Yeah, well, I think it's great. I love how all of this has led you to a place where, you know, you're collaborating with people like Art House and, you know, World Vision and all these organizations that are doing so much for our communities and for the world, like for, you know, globally. It's important. We all need that. And now, I mean, we're looking at the world and we're seeing more and more that, you know, there's the rich, and then there's people with nothing, and the middle class is kind of, you know,
Yeah.
it's just even when you just look at the housing market, how's any millennial supposed to buy a house now unless they have, you know, their parents to help them, or but it's hard for a human being, a young human, to build any kind of equity to invest in themselves. And we have to figure out ways to give back, like with Art House, you know, giving these kids an opportunity to do art when they can't afford to. That, you know, that can lead to, at 17, I'm not going to high school anymore, and becoming the next Picasso or Andy Warhol or whatever. Like, they need to see opportunities outside of what is, you know,
Yeah.
sort of
Shout out,
dictated by
shout out
society.
to Gemma Hagerman and Don Pengman on that from Oakville, because
Yeah, he's
that's
going to come on the show, Don.
are you
Don
getting
will be
Don on
on
the
my
show?
show. Yeah, yeah, he'll come in
Well,
May. He's going to
do
come.
half the show with Don, but do the good half with Gemma.
Okay.
And I hope she heard that. No, they're great. And yeah, I don't live that way. I would live 2 hours away from Oakville now, but
Yeah.
that is, and my sister-in-law and my niece have both done work with Art House. It's such a wonderful organization that, you know, has been really successful in getting arts programming to families that otherwise wouldn't be able to afford it. But at the same time, they can still use more help. So if people out there haven't heard of Art House, and it's one word. Look up Art House.
Yeah, and actually, if anybody's watching, you can go to my website. I've got a bunch of info on them because we're doing a special fundraiser. We're doing a canoe project, so I'm gonna be
Oh,
painting a canoe with all the kids in the summer, and
they've done
yeah, I'm
canoes and
excited about that.
they've done deck chairs, but they've done canoes, I think, a couple times. Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So if anybody wants to donate a canoe, we're still looking for one.
All
Yeah.
right. I saw one out back of
Case-
my house. It's not mine, but
Oh, really? I'll come pick it up.
let me take it out and see if it leaks first.
Yeah.
Yeah, my neighbor's probably listening, going, "Thanks."
That's my canoe.
Yeah. So yeah, you were talking about housing
Yeah.
and stuff. I mean, a big
Yeah.
thing for me has been mental health, especially through the pandemic. I was furloughed myself, which can do a bunch of things to your brain because you realize, oh, I have a job, but I'm not being paid anymore. Oh,
Mhm.
that messes with you. And then, 6 months of furlough, thank God for the CERB.
Yeah.
But 6 months into that, you realize, no, now my job's been eliminated because charities were hit so hard. And at the time, I'd been with World Vision for 3.5 years, just about three and a
Mhm.
half years. Since then, I had a contract with War Child that was in a similar area of work. Um, Influencer and celebrity engagement was a part of it on behalf of the cause. And it was a 2-month contract that I was thrilled was, what do you call it? Renewed twice.
Yeah.
So I was there for nearly 7 months. So that was great. Um, Still looking for my next full-time home, but been, since moving and finding a new community, a super creative community. There's been lots of projects, let's put it that way. But
Yeah.
yeah, my main thing is, you know, celebrity engagement, influencer engagement in charitable work, finding those win-wins where a celebrity can amplify the cause but still get something in return. That's always kind of the goal. And
Yeah.
people have often said, Reuben Hurricane Carter and Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen and Reuben Carter, a number of the different things, the Property Brothers with World Vision. Kevin, you got to figure out a way to make this your living, your job. And I don't know if I've, beyond those jobs, I don't know if I figured that out, but one day I might.
Mhm.
But always
Yeah.
looking for that next partnership. It's so satisfying to come home at night, go to sleep at night,
Yeah.
and know that you've had a blast doing good. What's that
Yes.
phrase about doing doing well by doing good, whatever that phrase is. I like it.
Exactly. I love it too. Okay, another reason for me to get my ass out there and visit you. Because yeah, we're on the same page with that. So it would be fun to, strategize on that stuff. Hey, maybe we can
Yeah,
help Daryl Hall with Lyme disease. That's a big deal for him.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
turned into a thing for a lot of musicians. I think that's
Yeah.
something that we're starting to understand better, like what happened with Avril, who was
Hmm.
more public about it than most. And I think there's probably a lot
Yeah.
more stories out there about Lyme disease, and then other ones
Yeah.
that where they maybe don't know that's what they were dealing with or are dealing with. That's a scary
Yeah.
one. That's a
That
scary
is
one.
a scary. Yeah. Yeah. Kevin, you're awesome.
Thank
I'm
you.
so happy. Now I feel like I've filled in the blanks on all these questions I had. Because the last time I saw you was here when we celebrated my 50th birthday. Can you believe that's
Yeah,
going to be 4 years ago already?
still
And
a
that
big
was fun.
memory.
Yeah, and you know what was the best part? I remember like people were here and you and Rosalind came and you had a bottle of champagne and you went and that was your drink for the night. You did like a total rock star. I'm drinking champagne out of the
It was a
bottle tonight.
it was a decadent rock star thing. Yes, drinking champagne out of the bottle
Yeah,
all evening,
yeah.
and
Oh, it was good. And it was an 80s themed party, so that it worked
decadence
like
fit
it was
right
so
in.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very cheap champagne.
Was it?
But it was a good prop, but it wasn't the greatest champagne.
That's so
Thank
funny.
you so much.
Well,
I
thank
really enjoyed this, and yeah,
you. Good. Me too. You're
I
awesome.
appreciate your interest in what I'm up to and what you're doing. I mean, you started this during the pandemic, and I know it helped a
Yeah.
lot of people with getting to know her.
Yeah.
And then after the pandemic, you went, I like this. I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to broaden the guest
Yeah.
palette.
Exactly.
And here I am.
Yeah. Yeah. It's perfect.
And
Yeah.
I appreciate it,
Everybody's
and want you to come visit my space sometime soon
okay. I
with
will
your
do that.
husband and your pooch.
Yeah. Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah.
It'll happen. Thank you so much, Kevin. Okay, I'm going to put you in the virtual green room. I'll be
Okay.
right back to
You.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. What a great guy. Kevin September. See, networking. You got to get out there and meet people and do your thing. And now I feel like we're finally starting to do that again. So nobody's perfect at it. You got to practice, but just yeah, be in front of people because they want to see you and you make them feel good. So keep doing that. Now, if you want to do some shopping this afternoon, please go over to brendabadome.com. Use the coupon code Get to Know Them for 22% off of these beautiful clothes. And make sure you visit my website, glamjewels, GLAMJULZ.com. Grab yourself some lovely jewelry. Get ready for Mother's Day. I will see you back here next week with another amazing guest and keep on showing the world your sparkle. Bye for now.